Hello, this is Andrea with the Still Experimental American Thinker podcast, and I won't waste your time. Let me get right into it. First thing I want to focus on is a couple of classic examples of the Democrats' inherent racism. The first is the officially announced new Kamala Harris policy to create an opportunity agenda for Black men. I'll read you the 5 items. Some of them you may like or not. Two of them should stand out. First, provide 1 million loans that are fully forgivable up to $20,000 for Black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. 2, support education, training, and mentorship programs that lead to good-paying jobs for Black men, including pathways to become teachers. 3, protect cryptocurrency investments so Black men who make them know their money is safe. 4, launch a national health initiative focused on the illnesses that disproportionately impact Black men. And 5, legalize recreational marijuana and create opportunities for Black Americans to succeed in this new industry. So some of them, health problems. Black men are more likely to have diabetes, heart attacks, obesity, things like that. I'm not clear about the protected cryptocurrency investments. From whom are they protecting them? But the ones that, of course, stand out are the loans that nobody expects Black men to pay back, and the opportunity to become legal drug users and legal drug dealers. Could anything more clearly exemplify the soft bigotry of low expectations that Democrats have toward Blacks? Race hustlers, and Kamala Harris is definitely one of those, desperately want to keep Blacks from succeeding. And you do that by encouraging self-destructive behaviors, violence, which they encourage by removing all consequences, drugs, which you can see here. I have a particular issue with marijuana because I know people who've become stoners and it just destroys lives. It turns them into inert vegetables. And of course, as Alex Berenson has pointed out, for people who have a propensity to mental illness, it is a gateway drug to violent psychopathy. The broken families amongst the Blacks, with the government acting as daddy so that the men can just impregnate women and go their merry way, often a merry way that ends in prison. And, of course, the whole racial resentment shtick that tells Blacks that truly virtuous behaviors such as ambition, self-reliance, being reliable, hard work are all white supremacist expectations imposed on hapless Blacks. When Blacks turn away from these Democrat values and embrace faith, family, hard work, self-reliance, America will change forever. And as Thomas Sowell says, we only need 30% of Blacks to do that, and Trump is actually creeping up on those numbers across America. I also, while I'm talking about Blacks, I want to make a point that is going to be controversial, but heck, I'm going to make it anyway. Let me preface it by saying that I am not saying slavery is now or ever was a good thing. It is a moral wrong, and nothing makes it good. Having said that, here's an interesting observation. For some time now at my personal blog, Bookworm Room, every Friday I do an illustrated edition, memes, and one of the things I include in the memes when I have them are pictures I call white privilege pictures. And what they do is show people, white people in America and in England, in incredible states of impoverishment, in just the most dire straits, children starving on the streets, people living in such squalor, it's unbelievable, just horrible lives. And it is a reminder that for most of human history, people have lived in abject misery and awfulness, regardless of color. It's also a reminder that the modern era, free market capitalism, and America's liberty-based ideals, which encourage all people to strive, and enough have strived and succeeded to raise everybody's standard of living, that America is unique and that this was just an extraordinary thing. But again, it's a reminder that most people literally died in the gutter and nobody cared about them. And the irony of slavery is that when the slave trade shut down, 1803, 1811, I forget 18 what, but what it did was it increased the value of every black slave in America. Doesn't make slavery right, didn't make their lives better, but what it meant is that someone had a vested interest in their survival, which could not be said for most of the Americans who died horribly, even as they tried to make their lives better and their children's life better. Just a different way of thinking about things. The other thing I want to talk about, talking about race, is a meme that I found on the internet, and it was originally posted at Blue Dem Warriors, and it purports to be an advertisement for field labor. And obviously the point is that illegal aliens do the jobs that Americans won't do. So let me read it to you. Now hiring. Farm labor. American citizens only. Work hours are sun up until sundown. Maybe a half-hour lunch. Must be able to work in extreme heat. Must be able to lift 40 to 50 pounds above shoulders. Ability to bend and move quickly picking the potatoes. You will be paid 45 cents a bucket. The faster you move, the more money you can make. Hurry on down to your local sweet potato field to apply. Driver's license and legal documentation is a must. Obviously, the point is that, again, illegal aliens are doing the jobs Americans won't do. But the other takeaway is that, hey, illegal aliens are here as slave labor, and we want it to continue that way. So just think about that. A lot of Democrats have said things. Remember Nancy Pelosi saying, who will do our gardens, clean our houses, and sweep our swimming pools if we don't have illegal aliens? J.D. Vance has been pushing back against this in the construction industry. I don't have a problem with legal immigration. If we decide that America needs more workers, fine. We do it through Congress, through our elected representatives changing the law. You don't do it through a lawless administration doing lawless things. Okay, I want to talk to you about something. It's funny at a couple of levels. Madison Square Garden is an iconic American location. What I want to do before I get started on this is read to you from the Madison Square Garden page about all the awesome people and acts and famous things that have happened there. So I'm quoting, Madison Square Garden has been the site of 4 Democratic national conventions and 1 Republican national convention. Landmark visits from Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis, Marilyn Monroe's famous birthday serenade to President John F. Kennedy, and Frank Sinatra's main event concert, and the 25th anniversary Rock and Roll Hall of Fame concerts in 2009. I have to admit, I'm skipping dates. I'm just going to the substantive stuff. So there are a lot of ellipses in this. The arena has also hosted 4 prominent benefit concerts, which galvanized the public to respond to national and global crises, including the first of its kind concert for Bangladesh, as well as a concert for New York City after 9/11, from the Big Apple to the Big Easy to benefit those affected by Hurricane Katrina, and 12-12-12, the concert for Sandy relief. Top musical acts that have played in the world's most famous arena include Elvis Presley, John Lennon, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Madonna, Elton John, yada, 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 yada. Everybody, anybody, humanitarian, it's all been history making. It's all been at Madison Square Garden. It is a completely appropriate venue for Donald Trump, who is a larger-than-life person who's been on the American scene for decades, lives in people's imagination, and either has internal polling showing that he can actually win in New York, or is trying to make the Democrats worried enough to think he can win. So how do Democrats respond? They start screaming that this is a sure sign that Trump is a Nazi. Their evidence is that in 1939, when Madison Square Garden was actually at a prior location, the German-American Bund had a pro-Hitler rally, one evening rally at Madison Square Garden. How does this connect to Trump? Well, do you remember the Very Fine People hoax? When Trump said that at the Charlottesville event in 2017, when white supremacists showed up and opponents to white supremacists showed up, and then other people showed up just saying it's a really bad mistake to rip down America's history, because this was a Stonewall Jackson or Robert E. Lee statue, Robert E. Lee, because when you start tearing it down, there's no stopping. And of course, that turned out to be true, because by 2020, they were tearing down Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Teddy Roosevelt and Thomas Jefferson. So what Donald Trump said is there were some very fine people at the rally, and he referred to those who said we don't go full Mao on America's history. And then he explicitly said, I'm not speaking of the white supremacists, but that thus was born the very fine people hoax. So if you go to Wikipedia, when they talk about the Bund, they have a whole entry about this German-American Bund rally. They say that famous analogies and mentions to it are the Unite the Right rally, a white supremacist rally that took place in Charlottesville, Virginia from August 11 to 12, 2017, has frequently been compared to the German-American Bund's rally in Madison Square Garden on February 20, 1939. So there's your connection. Donald Trump did not say white supremacists are very fine people, but according to the left, he did. And that rally was just like what took place for Hitler in 1939. Therefore, Trump is Hitler. And so he's revisiting the scene of the crime by going to Madison Square Garden, which is how you get James Carville, who went from a pragmatist to an insane man, saying that we've got to quit being timid about making these connections and everybody should know that Trump is Hitler and he's revisiting the scene of the crime. But what's really, really funny is what's happening. So George Conway, among others, as you may recall, he's Kellyanne Conway's just fanatically anti-Trump husband who got himself involved with the Lincoln Project, which is a project that makes its money off of being anti-Trump and has basically become another leftist organization. And if I recall correctly, some of its members were accused of doing naughty things with little boys. Anyway, he says, he did a tweet, here's the sign-up link for Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden. Enjoy. And then you get a lot of people commenting that they went to the webpage and they signed up. And all of them imagine that what will happen is that Trump will come out on the stage to a completely empty Madison Square Garden because all the seats will have been false reserved. What they didn't do was read this fine print, because what they really did was that they gave the Trump campaign their names and maybe their addresses, phone numbers, emails, text numbers, everything. And so they're now on the Trump campaign mailing list. But if you read the small print, the joke's on them, because that's just a mailing list. The rally is still first come, first serve. But what they're doing is also a demonstration explaining why when you poll Americans as to who the greater threat to democracy is in America, and you know the left is always going on about my democracy and the threat to democracy, they routinely say Democrats are, because they understand that the main threat to democracy is the end of free speech. Well, main threats are end of free speech and making the right to bear arms illegal. And the Democrats want to end free speech, as evidenced by they're trying to keep people from attending a political rally by the Republican candidate. So, next thing, this is an amazing story, and it is such an indictment of Kamala Harris. So the headline from the Washington Free Beacon is, transgender yacht killer serving life sentence gets taxpayer-funded sex change surgery thanks to Kamala Harris. And that is exactly what happened. So John Jacobson Jr., and I got this from the same Free Beacon article, vile human being, had murdered someone, I believe, down in Mexico. And he is a mentally ill man in addition to being a psychopath. And he wanted sex change surgery. So he found Thomas and Jackie Hawks. They had a yacht. And he managed to talk his way onto their yacht, forced them to sign over some money to him, and then he horribly murdered them. He drowned them by tying them to the anchor. I mean, ugh. And eventually he got arrested, ended up in prison, and he was already given hormone treatment, but now California, at taxpayer expense, has given him the full or I guess the negative version of the full Monty, because he's lost his parts and now he's being put in a women's prison, which is always nicer than a men's prison. I feel sorry for the women in there with him. How does Kamala Harris figure into this? Well, let me explain. You might recall that in 2019, Kamala Harris answered an ACLU questionnaire by saying that she felt taxpayers should pay for sex change surgery. Not that there's really such a thing, but for cosmetic surgery for mentally ill people who are prisoners and illegal aliens and who feel that their body doesn't align with their self-image. So that's called gender affirming or sex change surgery. Those are both misnomers. It's just profitable surgery for the medical establishment, and she wants taxpayers on the hook for prisoners and illegal aliens. But it goes back before that. In 2015, a guy named Jeffrey Norsworthy, who was in prison for murder, sued the state to get this kind of surgery, and a federal judge ordered that he should get the surgery, and that order was affirmed. And then Kamala Harris, at the trial court level, the order was given and affirmed, and Kamala Harris pledged to appeal it to the Ninth Circuit. Never happened because, I don't know why, Jerry Brown paroled this murderer and the state never had to get on the hook. But another inmate named Rodney Quine filed an identical suit. And this time Kamala Harris did not pledge to defend Californians against this expense. Instead, she negotiated a settlement for the state to pay for the guy's surgery and all his legal fees, which amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he didn't give up anything in exchange except his genitals, I guess. And at the same time, California publicly announced that henceforth it would pay for these procedures for all people in prison. More than that, in 2019, Kamala apologized for opposing that lawsuit. So let me say this here. Kamala thinks that Americans need to pay for people to have fetishistic or surgery to align with their mental illness. One of the things I've always suggested, nobody listens to me, is that men who think they're women should get testosterone. If testosterone makes women more manly, wouldn't it make a man more manly? And the same for women who think they're men. Shouldn't they get estrogen? Because if estrogen makes men more feminine, shouldn't it make women more feminine? But that's a very simple solution. It is much, much better to destroy sexual norms, biology, and fund a huge, profitable, vile industry. So that's who Kamala Harris is. The last thing I want to do is simply read to you something that I meant to write about, never got the chance. It's from Vivian Kubrick, who is Stanley Kubrick's daughter. The background for this is that Trump debuted at a rally, one of his new commercials, and it is his pledge to stop the military from being woke. And what it really is a pledge to get transgenderism out of the military. And what he did was his ad campaign people juxtaposed scenes from Full Metal Jacket with videos of Richard Levine, who is the so-called transgender health secretary. I always forget what title he is. And people in the military going on social media to show their drag personas and boast about their non-binary identities. Now, I've never seen Full Metal Jacket. It is an anti-war film. It's hostile to the Vietnam War. And I understand that the soldier shown in the iconic scenes eventually cracks up and commits suicide. But the scenes are iconic. Even though I've never seen the movie, I've seen the scenes because it shows that Sergeant Ermey, Gunny Sergeant Ermey, berating this private and saying, basically breaking him down so he can build him up again as a soldier. And what we all know, my father served in 2 wars. He was in the World War II and the Israeli War of Independence. We've seen a lot of wars. War is not pretty. If you're not prepared, if you're not toughened, you will die. So the military must toughen troops. They cannot go out into the battlefield and go, oh, this isn't fun, it's scary, I don't like it. They have to be turned into fighters. And the tragedy is that some of them cannot be turned into fighters and are broken. Not saying that's good, but it's reality. But of course, the left attacked the Trump campaign for being so stupid as to use Full Metal Jacket. And AP naturally said that Trump didn't serve, and neither did Biden. But of course, Biden is destroying the military. So for the AP, it's okay. He didn't serve. So what happens is that Vivian Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick's daughter, steps into this and writes an amazing essay, which I'd like to read to you. It's very clear, obviously, that she is a conservative, but she's also intelligent. So let me read it to you, and that'll wrap this up. To those who think my father wouldn't have wanted Trump to use FMJ, which is what she calls Full Metal Jacket, FMJ footage, here are my thoughts. I agree in principle that an anti-war movie is incongruous with promoting the idea of a tough, non-woke U.S. military and thus war itself. However, these are very dangerous and strange times, and thus using this footage is doubtless pure expedience. Because I'm sure the irony of using FMJ footage is not lost on Trump or his team. Trump is always seeking to end wars and use peaceful methods. However, that's primarily what FMJ is about, the shocking and complicated paradoxes of human nature. And thus, on this tooth and claw planet, you need a very strong military. So I'm going to stick with the idea that FMJ footage was used primarily because of its powerful, realistic portrayal of boot camp, juxtaposed with the entirely demoralizing and inappropriate injection of a woke ideology into the USA military, which I agree with myself. And what she's saying is I agree with the juxtaposition. So, which I agree with myself and which I'm certain my father would have agreed with. Truthfully, I believe my father, who supported Reagan, would very much approve of saving America, indeed the world, from the highly destructive globalist forces threatening to take over this planet. And if that footage from FMJ helps Trump make the point that the U.S. military needs properly trained, super tough, focused, dedicated warriors, and not introduce the demoralizing effects of wokeism and attracting people to join up simply to have their sexual reassignments paid for, then Trump has my blessing. Finally, knowing my father very well, I can assure you he had a profound grasp of how paradoxical human nature is, which accounts for how, at the same time he made anti-war films, he had a great passion for guns, self-defense, not hunting, and he had quite a few. My father had a great respect for life, his movies being unimpeachable evidence of his love for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So on that basis, I feel very confident he would be a Trump supporter and would forgive using FMJ incongruously if it helps the cause of freedom. Capiche? And on that basis, I will thank you very much for your time, and I'll be back at the earliest opportunity when I have a moment of time to make this kind of podcast again.